Great. So thank you so much for joining today in the Truth Unveiled. Thank you so much. It's great that we find time to do this and say, just sit back and relax and let this happen to you. That's really great. So it's like a total gift. That's how I receive it myself. It's like it's a total gift to stand still, to be still, to listen, and to also be inspired to come to say further opening our consciousness to whatever is always available in the present moment, which is like more and more and more. It's like it opens up and it opens up, and yeah, so it's amazing, because what is really occurring here has nothing to do with that at all, with the images, with the colors, with even the one who's speaking, not even that. But we use it temporarily to have something to look at, and someone that seems to sit in a certain location doing this. All of that, of course, is not what it appears to be. But what is true, which is the greatest of all, is like what is true is the communication that is instantaneous, that is just like right in the middle of birth, of creation, of inspiration, of being completely present and say not knowing what the next moment will be, but in full expectancy of it. And that's the spirit of Joel, in fact. When he's talking, in his talk today, for instance, in say, it's about grace. I forget the titles because I read many of them. It's like, no, grace is the word. Grace reveals itself. That's a bit like the title of this meeting. It's like grace reveals. Grace reveals. Grace reveals. And Joel, in the talk that we listened to today, in the tape, Joel steps in with an expression. We come to that in a moment. That is radical, it's revolutionary, because you might read over it without you knowing it. When you listen to him, it's like, yeah, or you don't even notice. Which he says is like, the human mind is not capable of receiving God, of totality. It's impossible. It's literally impossible for a human mind to come to your enlightenment. Now here we are. And so are you a human being? Are you? No, apparently you're not, because something has shifted and changed in your consciousness. So something opened up. It's like there must be something else. And this was sufficient to let something else occur in your consciousness. This cannot be it. If there is an all-loving God, it cannot be that the ones that I love are taken from me. That would be a rude, a cruel God. Even in that it is already so clear that none of this human existence has any reason, not any reality whatsoever, just because of this one fact. Like, no, there is no God taking anyone from you. No, the place where you perceive it isn't real. But that doesn't say anything about the all-loving God that created you. Now this is a hurdle you cannot take as a human being. It's like, no, I cannot be a human being because I don't believe this, what is occurring. I feel the pain of losing the ones I love, but it does not seem to be real to me. It cannot be real because there's an all-loving God. He wouldn't not even think for one instant to take anything away from me. So this is great. This is like, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And so anyway, we'll continue with that later. There's some real beautiful expressions of Joel that come from the talk, because we're not listening to the whole talk. I can distill some expressions out of it that we're going to use to just let something occur in our consciousness, like a little shift, a little shake, a little tweak, and then it suddenly makes sense what's being shared, and you want to catch that. You don't want to miss that. So we're going to listen to Joel later. We're going to, as I be part of a really beautiful prayer meditation of Joel. It's called I Pray. First we do it in English, then Michelle recites it in French. We have 5 minutes of silence in between, then we repeat that one more time. I pray. I am come to the throne of God, which is established within me, and to pray, not for anything, nor any condition, nor any person. I pray only that God's grace be revealed, that God's will be done in me, that the way of God be opened up unto me, that I may come to know Him aright and find life eternal. Not necessarily that I have to live my eternal life on earth, but to live it in accord with God's will and under God's grace. I pray that I may learn to know and to love my fellow man and understand him spiritually, regardless of any outer coverings, regardless of physical structure, racial or religious covering. I pray that I may come to know the man behind all of this facade. I pray to understand the spiritual nature of love, the spiritual nature of life, the spiritual nature of abundance, the spiritual nature of brotherly love, the spiritual nature of body, the body of God's creating, the temple not made with hands, the eternal body. I pray for the revelation of God's government on earth as it is in heaven. I pray for a revelation of the nature of the Savior. I pray for the revelation of the nature of spiritual power, spiritual presence, spiritual law.
La vraie prière. Je suis arrivé au trône de Dieu qui est établi au-dedans de moi-même. Et ce, afin de prier, pas pour une chose, une condition ou une personne. Je prie uniquement pour que la grâce de Dieu soit révélée, pour que la volonté de Dieu soit faite en moi, pour que la voie de Dieu me soit ouverte, pour que je puisse arriver à bien le connaître et trouver la vie éternelle. Pas nécessairement pour que j'aie à vivre ma vie éternelle sur la terre, mais pour la vivre en accord avec la volonté de Dieu et sous la grâce de Dieu. Je prie afin de pouvoir apprendre à connaître et à aimer mon prochain et à le comprendre spirituellement, sans prêter attention aux revêtements extérieurs, sans prêter attention à la structure physique, à l'enveloppe raciale ou religieuse. Je prie afin de pouvoir arriver à connaître l'homme qui est derrière toute cette façade. Je prie pour comprendre la nature spirituelle de l'amour, la nature spirituelle de la vie, la nature spirituelle de l'abondance, la nature spirituelle de l'amour fraternel, la nature spirituelle du corps, le corps de la création de Dieu, le temple qui n'est pas fait à l'aide de mains, le corps éternel. Je prie pour la révélation du gouvernement de Dieu sur la terre tel qu'il est dans les cieux. Je prie pour une révélation de la nature du Sauveur. Je prie pour la révélation de la nature du pouvoir spirituel. de la présence spirituelle et de la loi spirituelle.
So, thank you. So, did you say Amen to the prayer? That was beautiful. So, thank you for being in that with me. That's beautiful. So, we continue with a little bit of preparation. And I already started with a statement that Joel brings in, and this was the one, like a human mind cannot come to this. It cannot come to enlightenment. A human mind cannot reach God, he says. It's like, that's impossible. And so now continuing, like, why is that so impossible? Now even coming to enlightenment, you could say, or coming to communication, coming to the glory of God, allowing yourself to feel that will not happen within the human definition of itself. And why is that? Because if you would be able to do that, you would have done it. You would have already been successful. Then you wouldn't know how to get out of it. Like if you read a book of Joel, it doesn't tell you how to get out of it, and not applying human mental capacity to get out of it. It will never work. So you have come this far and recognize that you, of your own self, like within your construct of yourself, cannot come to it, cannot come to direct communication with God. Because the place where you find yourself, that you think yourself, literally, that you really make yourself, because it isn't your place, is what is preventing you from having a full-blown awakening experience, or full-blown communication with God. That's preventing you from it, because you already made a substitute for it, you could say. Now you can say, like, well, I'm a student of the infinite way, and then I say, yeah, even that idea would be a limitation, because now you are a student of the infinite way. That's not what you are. I think Joel will tell you that too. It's like, that's not what you are. You're not a student of the infinite way. If you think you're that, then there's another description of yourself that isn't it. So you can come up with 1,000 goals to get it, or to do it, or to try it, or to who knows what, but they will all fail. Now this is essential in the whole waking up, because it shakes you, in fact, in your fundamental belief systems, that you think that you are a human being living here sometime, then probably living another lifetime, some who knows how, and on and on and on, living in an idea that you're on a planet and all this, like that there's an objective reality, and that determines, that asks things of you, that asks you to accept and adapt to what is going on. And that cannot simply be true. Like, that cannot be true. Just like I said, with the loved ones that seem to be taken from you. Now you love with all of your heart, you love your neighbor, and now your neighbor is going to be taken from you. Your dearest friend, your dearest parent, or your dearest child is going to be taken from you. That is not what a loving God does. That does not make any sense. So that was one part. But then the other part is that your brothers, you seem to be having a disease, or having like difficulties in walking, pain in their joints, having this, having that, having who knows what accidents. That cannot be God. That cannot be the will of God. You know, and so this place does not make sense. Threatening, incredible crisis here and there, hunger, starvation. Well, you know the whole scenario. I mean, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But so that makes this place as an unreal place. So if you if you think you are here and this is the place where you live, that this is you, in fact, being in this world, and then you miss the direct communication, because the communication with your source starts in a whole different place that has nothing to do with any kind of image, not with any kind of definition. It has not to do with the mental or physical sphere, the material sphere. So there's something completely different going on that we cannot define. It's like God is, but you cannot go any further than recognizing that God is, or I am that I am. You cannot go any further in the description, because that would immediately be a limitation for yourself if you think you are that. So that goes pretty deep. That's really, really fundamental. This will lead to a fundamental shift in your thinking. And the shift in your thinking, a change of mind, you could say, like the shift in your thinking will be that you don't expect this to be your reality. So that means that you have to look for it in another place. And we say we go within. And that has nothing to do with any description that we give it, but it's a place where the alternative is available. That where we cannot speak of is right there for you. So when I, with my fake human identity, releasing my ideas about myself, releasing means releasing the value I put on my identification, the value I put on the attributes that I think make me. If I release the value that I give that, then suddenly my consciousness starts to open, and I discover there is something else going on. And that what will speak to me as a still small voice, or that what will say, show me a peace that passes understanding. Well, this is the real occurrence, in fact, what you're waiting for. Now, there's no book that can bring you there. There's no teacher that can bring you there. So that is really important, because the teacher, as you receive him, will be like giving you ideas, and that's not what this is about. Like it is opening your consciousness for something, which is like in fact a very intimate activity in you. It's happening in you, where you allow yourself to melt into the love of God. Now, this melting in means that is your one goal, that is your one purpose, that is the thing you want above all else. When that is the case, then you are experiencing that immediately. Like that is the space that it needs in order to let it be yourself, or let it be itself. Now, this is what we train, of course, or what we practice in the meditation. We don't do that to become more capable of getting there or achieving something. That's what I've said this many times, but it's more like, no, this inward direction is at the same time a total invitation to melt into that, what is given, to let your defenses go, to let your validation system or your value system release that all together. And in fact, dying in your humanhood, as Joel tells you to do. Now we have a couple of expressions, and I wanted to bring them. So here's our first expression. You cannot reach God through the human mind or with the human mind. You cannot embrace God or truth in the human mind. And yet, truth can impart in itself to us. But it isn't likely that the fullness of truth can, because of our inability to receive it. We do not have the capacity to receive the fullness of truth as we see ourselves. That is impossible. Like, we cannot receive that as we see ourselves. If we release those ideas, then there will be space in our consciousness. If we allow ourselves to to go past that, to go past our ideas, allowing them to be exchanged, you could say, for a different experience. But that is at the same time the dying daily that we practice. Now, grace is not a power. Grace is a presence. And in the presence of grace, there's no need for any powers, because there is nothing of an erroneous nature. See, this is the thing that we walk up to, and that's the same as what I shared in the beginning. It's like the grace of God has nothing to do with images, so it has nothing to do with definitions. Now look around you and look at what you are thinking. You're continuously defining yourself, so that's not the place to receive grace. It does not need my definitions, it doesn't need my images. So releasing the value that I give those is also like not paying attention to that for a moment. That will allow grace to come to me. And that is how simple it is. Now, grace is not a power. Grace is a presence. And in the presence of grace, there is no need for any powers, because there is nothing of an erroneous nature. There's nothing that needs to be repaired, in other words. So be still. I within am God. So just be still and let I be God. And relax in that grace that realizes law is not power. The law of the mind is not power. The law of beliefs is not power. Grace reveals the non-power. Grace reveals the non-power. The presence of grace reveals the non-presence of power, of law, the place of non-power. Like grace does not need to be an power. So it's like that is the whole thing with an idea of being. Being is everywhere, continuous. It doesn't have an opposite. It is complete. It is full on, you could say. It is itself. And it doesn't have an opposing force. It does not have an opposing power. So there's nothing in contrast with it. That's what beingness is, and that you can even imagine that. Like that's what beingness is. It is just extending from itself in all directions, you could say, and in no directions. So, yeah, grace, everyone has an experience of grace, and that's as simple as that. Like you have experiences of grace where suddenly you feel like, oh wow, I cannot believe this. I don't even know where this is coming from, but it's actually coming to me. And wow, thank you. We all have moments like these. Now here it is, like the more I come into that, the more I can give that away, you could say, the more I receive that for myself too. So this is always the case with whatever is given. You increase it in yourself by giving it away, by sharing it, by opening that up, by seeing that as a possibility in all your situations. Like there is a possibility to give this away. I don't know how. I don't have to know how in order to give it away. My love for my brother, or my direction, my action of mind of giving that is sufficient to get full support from the universe to extend that to whoever can receive it in that moment. So that's the thing with, if you would keep that for yourself and stay with, yeah, it's such a great experience and now it's great and now it seems to be gone, I don't know. So you start to turn into yourself. So in order to keep this, you give this away. It doesn't mean that you have to walk to every corner street to give it away or something. No, this can be very silent, but it can be still an action of mind of giving this. And then, like, when you do that, the immediate thing that happens is in fact that you come into receiving it for yourself. In quietness and in stillness is the presence of grace. In thy presence, the presence of stillness, quietness, peace, is fulfillment, divine harmony. In quietness and in stillness is the presence of grace. In thy presence, the presence of stillness, quietness, peace, is fulfillment, divine harmony. So the closer you get to that place where your mind isn't busy seeking around for some truth, the sooner you will see that truth keeps pouring itself through you from the source. Well, this is exactly what I mean. It's like, that's the way to go. So this quietness, it is not necessarily in a quiet place or anything. No, it's literally in a mind setup. You could say in your mind setup when you have nothing else to do but to give this. Like there's no disturbance of that action of mine to give it away, or to be conscious that that is given you and sharing that with your brother. If your mind is only like occupied with that, then that happens. So and that's what we call the stillness then. It's like it's not necessarily that you have to sit still and be totally quiet to let it occur. Absolutely not. So that can occur while you are actually in a conversation with someone. Like there's an emptiness in your mind where there's a possibility to give this away. Because in this emptiness in your mind, when it's quiet in your mind, in this stillness that is, say, in your consciousness, you also receive it when to give this away and to whom. So that all falls into place when you come to, in fact, going beyond the human mind and becoming still in yourself to listen. That can be while you talk, that can be while you do all kinds of things. It really does not matter. It's like, that's not that you have to adapt your behavior or something. No, it works. It works 100%. The only thing is that you need to empty your mind. You need to quiet down your mind in order to receive it and give it. So the closer you get to that place where your mind isn't busy seeking around for some truth, the sooner you will see that truth keeps pouring itself through you from the source. Although in our spiritual life we are now living less by the physical laws and more by the mental laws, and eventually less by the mental laws and more by the absence of the law, by grace, because grace transcends all law. At this point we are living by grace, and it is the grace of God that functions through us as benevolence, or purity, or kindness, or whatever qualities, integrity, whatever it is that functions through us. We are now enabled to say with the Master, "Why callest thou me good? Why callest thou me spiritual?" It is a state of grace that is functioning. So Joel gives it all. In one talk he just gives it all already, going through all the phases that he is in fact describing. So here you see in this sheet you see the whole steps that we take. Although in our spiritual life, this is the first step, although in our spiritual life we are now living less by the physical laws, we allow ourselves, you could say, moments in which we don't let the physical laws dominate us, and more by the mental laws, like, no, it's not in the physical, so temporarily you start to think, what am I doing and how is this working? And you try to figure it out, because the mind, when it perceives something, it will try to look for a solution and it cannot find it. Now the next step is then, okay, I'm not able to find it. Now what am I going to do? I'm going to give this up, in fact. Give up all my ideas for just a moment, and not let myself be determined by the laws that I have been treasuring before. Letting them go, I actually allow myself for grace to dawn on me. And then it goes further. At this point we are living by grace, and it is the grace of God that functions through us as benevolence or purity or kindliness or whatever qualities, integrity. Whatever it is that functions through us, we're now enabled to say with the Master, "Why callest thou me good?" See, this is what Joel says here. So the next step is, okay, my mind is open. I'm not. It's like I'm not using my mind to determine anything or thinking that I know what the solution is or how it's supposed to look. Now grace is functioning my life. So literally, like in every step that I take, I allow that to come forward instead of my great ideas and my great insights and all the experience I have. It's like, no. So here's an opportunity to let grace and light and love do the work. I'm allowing that to change this whole setup that we find ourselves in. And this is literally possible without exception in every situation. Now Joel brings this into an hour talk all together. So this is like you have to stay on the edge of your seat to even recognize what he's saying. Because in his voice there's an assurance and a quietness and then like, oh yeah, of course, kind of response that it evokes. But at the same time, don't forget what he is actually sharing with you and what instruction he is giving to you, even though at the same time he's comforting you on a deep level. So that's an amazing occurrence. Now we're going to listen to half an hour, the first half hour of this tape, and I suggest that you listen to the second part if you didn't already of this tape, because it's like there's a real succession in it, and you don't want to miss out on what he's presenting you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
In the talk on Saturday and on Sunday, a subject opened that came into fuller fruition last night. And I think that it started in my sleep and awakened me, and then in a half sleep it continued to unfold. You remember several things were said Saturday and Sunday that had to do with our inability to know the truth, our incapacity to know the truth, or perhaps to the effect that nothing that we know is the truth, and therefore that we are not to depend on any truth we know or on any statement of truth we know, that rather in any and every experience that we are to open our consciousness and be receptive to whatever may be imparted to us. This goes back, of course, to the fact that the activity of the human mind cannot reach God. You cannot reach God through the human mind or with the human mind. You cannot embrace God or truth in the human mind. And yet, truth can impart itself to us. But it isn't likely that the fullness of truth can, because of our inability to receive it. We do not have the capacity to receive the fullness of truth, and therefore we are receiving facets of truth, realizations of truth, principles of truth. This ties in with the subject of not living on yesterday's manna, not depending on anything you knew yesterday. In other words, if we are in meditation, we certainly are not in meditation to remember something that we have read in books. We are in meditation for the purpose of receiving an impartation from the Father within. And it may come to us in the form of something we have heretofore known in Scripture or spiritual writings. But the point is that it is coming to us as an impartation of the Spirit, not as an activity of memory. The activity of the human mind is not power in the sense of spiritual power. And all of the knowledge that can be embraced in the human mind, even all the knowledge of truth, is not spiritual power. The knowledge of truth acts to remove from us our ignorance of the nature of spirit and its activities and operations. To illustrate this, when we first come to the study of truth, we believe that God is a great power and that if we can just get God, we are going to have the power that will destroy the earthly errors. And now, through our studies, this ignorance is chipped away, and we learn to stop looking to God or expecting God to remove the evils of this world. In the same way that as we study, we learn that there is but one power. And here again, we have a help that enables us to stop trying to get a power to do something to another power called evil, sin, disease, death. And with this knowledge of truth, we are enabled to cease that mental activity of expecting a God to overcome our enemies, and we are thereby enabled to relax inwardly and await the realization of grace, the non-power. Every principle of truth that we learn, every principle of truth that we study and practice, develops our consciousness to the place where we can resist not evil, where we can put up the sword, where we can retire into ourselves in an inner peace and thereby become aware of grace. Now, grace is not a power. Grace is a presence. And in the presence of grace, there is no need for any powers, because there is nothing of an erroneous nature. When Scripture says, "In thy presence is fullness of joy," it certainly indicates that in thy presence there are no sins, diseases, deaths, lacks, or limitations. Otherwise there would be no fullness of joy. So in thy presence, evil of any name or nature cannot function, for it has no existence. And therefore, our studies are all in the direction of bringing us to a place in consciousness in which we can relax, rest, in a state of receptivity, and then eventually hear or feel something that would indicate, "Fear not, it is I. Be not afraid, it is I. Nothing shall in any wise come nigh thy dwelling place." And now, see how this must inevitably bring us to a place of resting from taking thought. The place of realizing I cannot use truth, but if I relax, truth can use me. Truth can function my life. Or Paul, "I live, yet not I. Christ liveth my life." But now, if Christ is living my life, I am not thinking or doing. Christ is functioning through me and as me, and it is, as it were, I am standing to one side, being a beholder of Christ, truth, living my life. As you sit here listening, at the same time be relaxing. Let go of any thought and of every thought, and release even the belief that there is anything that you can do about anything. Relax in the sense of, "Oh, speak, Lord, thy servant heareth." To yourself remember, be still. Be still and let God be God. And feel that you could not possibly embrace God in your mind anyhow. Let the activity of the mind be still. Christ liveth my life. God functions my being. Let the whole earth be still. And above all, let my mind be still. Then you will see that whatever activity you are engaged in, business, art, music, healing, inventing, composing, studying, that as you first relax in this, letting the mind that was in Christ Jesus be your mind, then grace will function. Grace will function as wisdom. Grace will function as harmony, as peace. Grace will function as health, as wholeness, as completeness, as inspiration, as the source of knowledge. And it will flow through you and in you and as you. We in the Infinite Way work are now approaching the state and stage of consciousness that lives by grace, not by physical might, not by mental power, not by knowledge, but by grace. The knowledge of truth always serves a function in our experience, in that it helps us to settle back into this attitude of expectancy. But that is the only purpose that knowledge is now serving us, the knowledge of truth. Because actually, we are rising above the letter into the spirit. You will notice in all of the talks of 1963, it is emphasized that we are working toward the place of living without words and without thoughts. I mean, our spiritual living is without words and without thoughts. And every step of this year has been leading us up to this month, where we are actually experiencing grace. That is, the living above the letter, above the law. Just as there are physical laws that operate on the physical plane, mental laws that operate on the mental plane, and in our humanhood, we are always living by these laws. Although in our spiritual life, we are now living less by the physical laws and more by the mental laws, and then eventually less by the mental laws and more by the absence of law. By grace, because grace transcends all law. The law of self-preservation keeps birds as far away from humans as possible. And it isn't often that you will find birds making friends of humans. And yet, we have a St. Francis who shows us that even this law can be transcended, and we can live in such an atmosphere of grace that the birds will come to us and rest on our shoulders, on our head, on our hands. Certainly, for the most part, as humans, we want to stay as far as possible away from beasts, the wild beasts of the forests. And yet, we have witnessed states of grace. Daniel showed us this. And many have been able to prove to us that wild beasts are not always wild beasts. But this would only be true where an individual is above the law and in grace and under grace. And grace is the absence of power. Any power. Once you realize that you cannot use spiritual power, and that there is a state of grace, and you no longer rely on physical or mental powers, you then reach that attitude and altitude of consciousness, which is a state of grace, a state of non-power, and you discover that what heretofore has been power no longer is power in your experience. That it will probably be a long time before we demonstrate the grace consciousness in its fullest extent is evident by the fact that in the Master's resurrection, he still is full of nail wounds and knife wounds and broken bones, to show that, to that degree at least, he is still under physical law. Although even his bones must have mended to enable him to walk. But even if they didn't, he could walk without them being mended by grace. The point is not as to whether or not you can at this moment walk on water. The point is not whether or not you can on purpose swallow a bottle of poison and survive it. That is not the point. The point is that from the moment that you begin to function under grace, law has less and less power over you. And then you will discover that you may be called to those who have swallowed poison and you can bring them through it, or those have been seriously injured and you can bring them above the whatever the law may be. You must remember this, that to some extent, almost from the beginning of your experience in the infinite way, you have been under grace. For the simple reason that every healing that you have witnessed has been a proof of grace. The law involved has been overcome. If you have had a germ illness, a cold, grip, flu, pneumonia, or any of these things that are caused by germs, and you have had a spiritual healing, it was grace proved that the law was of none effect. The law just could not operate. The law of germs, of infection or contagion, could not operate where your consciousness was present. So it is, any manner of healing, physical, mental, moral, financial, was a proof that the law was not able to function in the presence of your consciousness. It wasn't that your consciousness was a power over the law. It was a proof that the law wasn't a power in the presence of your consciousness of grace. What constituted your consciousness of grace? The fact that you had worked with the principle of one power. The fact that you had worked conscientiously that you had read it on every page of the books, that you had heard it on every tape, and that gradually your consciousness had come to accept the truth that there is but one power and it is spiritual. There is but one law and it is a spiritual law. Now, as your consciousness accepts this, the law hits up against it out here, and like darkness, it just isn't there anymore. That is how spiritual consciousness operates. And as a matter of fact, that's how it is formed. It is formed by our awareness, first through the intellect, of these principles. We come to accept God, or I, or God as my consciousness, as the only power. Just think how many of the books pound away at the theme that God is individual consciousness, my consciousness and yours. Now, if God is my consciousness, what chance would anything have operating for evil? Nothing shall in any wise enter that defileth or maketh a lie. Enter what? Enter God consciousness. Enter my consciousness if my consciousness is God consciousness. Therefore, as I am working with these writings and being filled with this message, this principle, that God constitutes my consciousness, and my consciousness is the one and only power, that there is no power external to me, that all power functions from within me, and it is only of a spiritual nature. Therefore, it doesn't govern anyone or control anyone or dominate anyone. It is a spiritual law of freedom unto everyone. Now, you are building the consciousness of grace. And then, lo and behold, something comes to your attention of your own, or of your families, or of your patients, or of your students, claiming to be a law. And it touches your consciousness, which is no longer your consciousness, but God consciousness functioning as your consciousness, the one and the only power, therefore the light of the world. And now what happens to darkness? It disappears. And you have not used the power, remember. You have not used the power of truth. You have not used the power of God. You have been the power of truth. You haven't used it. If anything, it has used you.
So it has used you. Thank you, Joel, so much. So you can listen to the rest of the tape, of course, on the EV Hub YouTube page, and this is very helpful because you see how beautiful the tape is, and that's what I love about the say 1963 Kailua classes, the private classes. Like they really are like a whole whole in themselves. They teach the same idea, and that's really beautiful and useful. So I think it's one of the most clearest Joel becomes in his expressions, and so that's only helpful. You know, it's like we're getting to a point where you need that clarity coming from Joel in this case. Like you need that clarity to get some things straight, where you have been lingering on or holding on to a little bit, still suggesting it's part of you. Suddenly you see it isn't, and it is allowed to go now. Now this is where the real transformation is happening for us. So that's really lovely. So thank you so much for today. I'm going to play some music, but I just wanted to say thank you for everything, and great that you are here. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and see you before you know it. Thank you so much.